Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute weekly show that airs at 8:30 a.m. each Saturday morning on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. Today, I'm speaking with Representative KristinaOrtez, the rep from District 42, representing Taos County. Last week, we spoke with Jay Levine, a Taos-based activist who is co-founder of Renewable Taos and the chair of the Democratic Party's state platform and resolutions committee. I never get that right, but I did. So January must be Taos month on Retake Radio. We'll get to Kristina in just a moment. If you're driving around and miss any of this show, you can watch the full YouTube recording of this and any other prior show by going to retakeourdemocracy.org and clicking on the Retake on the Radio button on the right side of the homepage. You can find links to recordings for all of our radio shows on that page. Before we get to Kristina, a few brief announcements. First, I want to acknowledge that we're conducting this show on stolen Tewa land and to thank our Tewa neighbors for being such good stewards of the land. I also want to remind you that the 2022 legislative session is underway and Retake is operating our legislative alert system again this year and our weekly huddles. We send out alerts whenever a bill we support or oppose is scheduled to be heard in committee or on a chamber floor. Each alert includes a summary of the bill, speaking points, and legislator contact information, as well as info on how you can watch the hearings and offer comment on bills from your couch, making it much easier for you to effectively raise your voice. This is year 5 of the alert system, so we've got the hang of it. You can sign up for the alerts by going to our homepage at retakeourdemocracy.org, clicking on the red Get Alerts button on the right side of the homepage. In addition to our alert system, we offer weekly Zoom huddles. We began doing our huddles last year, and they are back again this year by popular demand, occurring every Wednesday evening from 6 to 7. The huddles almost always include 1 or 2 legislators and most often representatives from ally organizations who are advancing bills we support. During the huddles, we discuss what transpired in the previous week and use that information to craft our messaging as we have volunteer observers, hearing observers, who record comments and votes. And so we have information about the concerns about the bill and are able to recraft our one-page summaries that we send to legislators with information countering the arguments against the bill. So it's the conversations in the huddles are very informative and a good way for you to start to understand how the legislature works. And let's see, okay. So let's get started talking with Kristina. Welcome, Kristina. Thank you for joining
Thank you so much. Thanks, Paul. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to be here this morning.
Okay, well, it's an early morning for both of us. I always like to let our guests introduce themselves. So how about you start by telling us who you are and how you got involved in state politics?
Well, thank you. I'm KristinaOrtez. I am originally from the Central San Joaquin Valley of California, a small farming town called Madera. It's near Fresno. I traveled around a lot after I graduated from high school, and I eventually found my way to Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2008. You know, I love this state. I've been here for almost 14 years. I moved to Taos when I was pregnant with my first child, right before, just a few months before she was born. We moved to Taos, and I have really just been in love ever since. Right now, for the last nearly 8 years, I've been the executive director of the Taos Land Trust. I have worked in conservation for most of my adult career, and I love working at the Land Trust. We work with students, private landowners to protect their land. We have a lot of education programs on our farm at Rio Fernando Park. So I love doing that. And in the course of that work, I've also long been involved in lots of programs to sort of get folks activated. I worked at the Sierra Club for a while. So, I have always been keenly aware of the role of local, state, and federal government in pushing forth the policies that we need to protect ourselves and make our communities sustainable. I was asked many times to consider running for office, and it just never happened until it did, and then it happened very fast. So in 2019, I decided to make a run for it, and here I am today, serving my second session of my first term. I love being a state representative. I wish we could modernize the legislature, but that's probably a conversation for another time, Paul. And I'm excited to have that conversation.
All right. Well,
but it's yeah.
We can go in that direction anytime. Okay. So why don't we start by you just telling us a little bit about what it was like the first session. What was the most surprising aspect of it, the most rewarding, and the most disappointing?
Okay, surprising, rewarding, disappointing. Well, it was, I use this word a lot to describe the session. It was kind of bonkers. I did most of the session at home. So all of my committee meetings were at home. The roundhouse was closed to guests and visitors. And we were in the midst of COVID with no vaccines. So I needed to keep my mother safe. My mother helps me with my two daughters during the session, and so I did it at home. I found myself kind of surprisingly very organized, and I was on the phone all the time and on Zoom all the time, and I kind of liked that because I was able to really be very focused on my legislation. I did spend the last couple of weeks going to the roundhouse, usually on the weekends, so that I could get that experience. And I will say this: like, there is nothing can match the being in front of someone and having a conversation and getting to know them. We hear a lot that the legislature is about relationships, and it really is, right? You can't you can't have that same camaraderie over Zoom. You don't really, you don't know that person's tics or tricks. And so it's really important to develop those relationships, which I was able to do a little bit toward the end of the session. I was surprised at how quiet it was when I was there during that first session, and that's completely different now that I've experienced in this second session. I guess the disappointments are, that there's not enough time to do the things that need to happen. All of a sudden 60 days comes and it's done, and you still have legislation on the table, you still have conversations to have, and budgets to look at, and we have to do the business of the state of New Mexico, I think, very quickly. And that was in a 60 session. I can't even imagine 60-day session. I can't imagine how it's going to feel in a 30-day session. So I think that's my sort of profound disappointment, is that it's not longer. We don't have more time to make those big decisions. What was the last one?
Disappointing.
Well, that was disappointing.
Okay. Well, I had a conversation once with Representative McQueen. We have coffee every once in a while, and he was talking about a time when someone had asked him whether he had opinion on the Health Security Act. This is a few years ago, and he goes, "I haven't read it," and they were outraged. And he said, "It's not assigned to my committee. I'm not gonna have to vote on it until it's on the floor, and so I'll look at it then. But I'm the chair of a committee, and I've got a boatload of bills coming. I got to know those bills." And it made me realize just how difficult it is to manage this in this time crunch. And I can't even imagine it. I've been reading bills the last 4 or 5 days as they've been pre-filed, and sometimes they're complicated things, and you don't have much time to really look at them and then consult with others, and who you consult with is really important. So I sympathize.
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. I do have deep regrets that I just don't have the time in the day to read all the bills. But he's right. And I serve on that committee with Chair McQueen, and I've known him for a very long time. And I completely agree with him and with you. There's just not enough time to read all the bills. And there are a lot of bills, a ton of bills, right? We were meeting, 3 days a week, and in that committee, because we had so many bills in the last session, we had to get through them. And those committee meetings take hours, and they should take hours.
Right.
But one more thing that I really loved, I know that this, I know I don't want to take too much time, but what I really loved about being virtual in the committees, and we're going to do that again this year, is that so many people from all around the state could participate. I think that made a huge difference. You didn't have to contend with the weather. You didn't have to, pay a lot of money for gas or a hotel room to participate in the democratic process in Santa Fe, right? You
I
could
hope that
be at home.
I hope when COVID's done, if it ever is, and I saw the news this morning that supposedly Omicron is on the wane. May it be so. But I hope they
Maybe
keep
so.
these virtual things, because I agree with you. I think I've had so many people from Las Cruces and Silver City and Taos tell us how much they appreciated being able to be engaged in the process from home.
Yeah, it's democracy at work. It really is. That was the most beautiful thing. If there, there were some silver linings with this pandemic, but that was one of them. I think is the realization that people can participate and should participate, and we should be open in that way. And it seems like we're going to be open in that way in committee.
Okay, great. Well, let's get back to bills. If you had to identify one bill in 2021 where you were especially disappointed it didn't pass, maybe it ran out of time, what would that be?
Oh, there were two bills that I'm really, really sad about. Three, but the one I think that would have had the greatest impact on all New Mexicans is the Utility Affordability Act, HB 206. And that was a bill that would do three things. One, forgive the some of the arrears that low-income folks had on their utility payments throughout the year under COVID when they couldn't work. It would establish a fund for energy efficiency and have reporting requirements. I worked really hard on the bill. That was the first bill I presented on the floor from my cozy home, but it was also the bill that I think engaged the most folks all around the state, and we made it past the floor, made it through one Senate committee, and just didn't make it through Senate Finance. We never heard it there, despite many folks calling and emailing. It just didn't get a hearing. And I think I was most disappointed because New Mexicans needed the help last year. They need the help now, and we could have started the work of getting low income Mexicans, especially the energy efficiency that they need in their homes, and it didn't happen. I was really disappointed about that. It was I've suffered many losses in my life, but this was just like, oh, we could have done this and we should have done this and we had the money to do it, and we didn't.
Man.
So
Yes, you said you had two or three disappointments.
yeah, the Natural Heritage Conservation Act amendments got through the House as well, and didn't get heard in Senate committee. We had a lot of support for that as well. There was a bill that passed unanimously in its committees to support acequias and ditches in their post-settlement needs. Even though your acequia, there's a water adjudication and a settlement, an acequia can only get support for that process in the process of the settlement, but not after for the implementation. And that was extremely disappointing to me, because we had unanimous support in the committees that it went through, and I think it would have had unanimous support on the floor, and it would have gone through and gotten out of the Senate. But we ran out of time, and that was very disappointing. I think it is coming back. I haven't looked at the list yet, but that was disappointing to me as well. It's the time factor,
Okay.
right? And that we can't just start again next year. If you go through your committees, I wish we could just sort of, in the next session, just start again, and you started the process that you left at. I think that would be very interesting.
So how about the flip side? What bills were you especially pleased to see pass, and why?
I worked with the Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management on a floodplain bill that would really ensure that local governments that have stricter floodplain regulations could make sure that those floodplain regulations are what sort of govern the building of any construction, whether it's a building or a trail that is supported by state money. So I think that was important because that helps us align with federal goals and federal standards. And so I was really pleased about that legislation getting through.
Okay. What about bills you introduced or sponsored? Did you have any big wins? I know you talked about a couple of disappointments.
That was one of my big wins, and I have another. It'll come to me. It's really early, Paul.
I know for our listeners, we tried to schedule this over and over again and just couldn't find a time. And so it's like 7:30 in the morning and both of us are kind of foggy.
I mean,
We're doing the best we can.
I'm usually up and around at 7:30, but it was a tough night last night. I have my children here with me in Santa Fe, so we working parents in the legislature, juggling all kinds of things. So I do remember now. It was actually it's a really great bill. It's a sustainable buildings tax credit. And that was first introduced, I think, by Brian Egolf and Peter Worth many moons ago. So we had to make some really critical updates, and those updates included giving some support for manufactured housing. So if you have a manufactured home and you want to invest in making your home nice and cozy, here's my daughter who just woke up.
There.
Hi, hey baby, I'm on a Zoom. Can I get back to you in a minute? Can I watch TV? Not quite yet. Not quite yet. Okay, thanks. It's the joys of the job. And it really is. So that was an awesome tax credit. It went through the House, it got to the Senate, signed by the governor. So we're really excited about that. But it really gives us some support for homeowners at all levels, including low-income families who can make their homes energy efficient, lower their utility bills. I'm super proud of that bill. I can't believe I forgot it for a second. But, so that's the kind of stuff I think that we need right now.
Okay.
And I'm glad it passed.
I need to take a little break here to remind our listeners that we're listening to KSFR. KSFR is more important than ever these days. With the age of misinformation, KSFR can be counted on for the truth and for good programming, whether it's music, culture, arts, or politics. So for those of you who can afford it, please consider making a contribution and think of it as your ticket for admission to a wealth of great programming. Just go to ksfr.org and click on the donate button and make a generous donation. Let's get back to our discussion with Representative KristinaOrtez. Can you tell us about, or you told us a little bit about HB 206, the Utility Affordability and Relief Act. Are you going to be reintroducing that this year, or is someone going to be reintroducing that? You are.
I am reintroducing it. Yep, I pre-filed. We don't have a message yet. We need a message. So if your listeners take to this, please call the governor's office. It's reintroduced a little bit differently. Now we're calling it the Community Energy Efficiency Development Block Grant. So SEED is what we're focusing on, and we do have some money in the budget, 10 million going to MNERD for energy efficiency for low-income families. And so what it looks like is that a political subdivision can tap into that funding to really support a neighborhood or a block or some affordable housing unit to invest in energy efficiency in those homes, right? Low-income New Mexicans face incredible energy burdens, and this is a way that we can kind of we can help our folks. The percentage is remarkable. Something like 14% of New Mexicans have who are living in poverty have high energy burdens, and in some cases, in some regions of New Mexico, that energy burden is much higher. Las Vegas, Socorro, Deming have really high. Those folks who live there have really high energy burdens, so they're spending way more on a monthly basis for their energy than others, right, as a percentage of their income. So what this bill would do is it install energy efficient appliances, heat pumps, refrigerators, things like that, better windows, so that we can lower the energy costs. And I think it's really important also to think about how low-income New Mexicans can participate in reducing our energy use, which then helps reduce it helps sort of participate in the climate crisis and bringing down those emissions and energy emissions. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. Also, I learned this over the summer when I was at a conference in Colorado around clean energy, and that is that energy efficiency has the greatest opportunity for job creation. I think that's really important for us to think about. So how we invest in that as a state is really critical. These are jobs, right? It takes people to come into your home and swap out appliances. That could be a really, really good job, and we have seen already. There's evidence that those jobs are thriving jobs.
That's great. That's great. So it kills, well, that's a bad analogy. But
Right.
It serves two purposes, and that's great. Along those lines, last session, Retake did not strongly advocate for electric vehicle tax credits and for storage on residential homes. The reason we didn't was because we got input from people that this really didn't benefit low income or moderate income people. But this year we're hearing from people that, with the declining cost of those things, the tax credits could make storage and electric vehicles possible for moderate and low income individuals and have a significant impact on their monthly utility costs or gas costs. And so we're going to support those bills this year. So it's, we've got to be thinking when we're doing policy like this, what the impact is on the low and moderate income communities.
Yeah, I think you said it best right there, Paul. And EVs are coming down in price. There are used EVs on the market. I think that we need to make sure that any tax credits we have there, are really focused on getting low-income New Mexicans to be able to participate, right? Whether it's double rebates for low-income folks, or and of course we need to invest in the charging stations all around the state. And there are some places that are doing a really, really good job of it. Taos has a lot of charging stations. We have plans to do more, but we also need to think about charging stations all over Las Cruces and Albuquerque and everywhere in between.
Yeah, we do. You don't want to get stuck in between with no charging, right? All right, so we're recording the show on Wednesday morning, as we've mentioned a couple times. It's the first full day of the session, so we won't be able to discuss anything that transpired that first week, but usually not much does. But I'm sure you have formed some of your legislative priorities, Representative. What are you hoping to get done in 2022, whether it's your bill or somebody else's?
I'm really excited about some of the sorry, I've got a lot of background noise. Hold on one second. Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. So I've got a couple bills. I'm bringing back the NHCA bill amendment that would allow for acquisitions, and there's some funding in the budget for state and political subdivisions to acquire land. This meets our 30 by 30 goals. And it also, I think, is really important for acequias and land grants and tribes to tap into some state funding and really, most importantly, meet those federal match requirements for one-to-one funding through the Land Water Conservation Act, Fish and Wildlife funding. There's lots of federal funding mechanisms that require that match. So I think that's a really important bill and it sort of aligns with, with my own priorities. Of course, the Community Energy Efficiency Development Block Grant. I'm really excited by the voting rights legislation that's coming up. I had a conversation yesterday with a member. I had expressed that some teachers were concerned about the possibilities of 16-year-olds voting in local elections. I've talked to many folks who've said, that's awesome. We need more engagement early. And other, lots of educators are like, oh my God, 16-year-olds, are you kidding? But I asked that question to another member who said, What we want is chronic voters. Let's start them young.
Yeah.
And let's start them young. Let's start them at 16 and do the work to prepare them to take that vote, right? Get engaged in civics classes again. Really, do the work to make our 16-year-olds understand how important it is. And so I thought that was pretty exciting. Let's make some chronic voters. So I'm excited about that legislation, really, truly. So I'm really keeping an eye on that. There's some really good legislation to make sure that educators aren't paying increased insurance premiums as they get higher salaries. The governor really has been pushing the at least a 7% increase for teacher salaries. That's awesome. We need more, but we also have to make sure that our teachers aren't paying exorbitant insurance rates. And so there's a really cool bill from Representative Andres Romero and Ray Lara to make sure that those insurance rates are aligned. And I've just signed on to that as a co-sponsor. I'm excited about that.
Can you tell us a little bit about why teachers are suddenly experiencing an increase in insurance rates?
I don't think it's sudden. I think that this has always been the case, that in some school districts that are under-resourced, the insurance rates are tied to salary. So the more you make, the more percentage of insurance you're paying. Some districts don't have that. I think APS, keeps it kind of locked. You're paying, a small portion of your salary goes to the insurance costs, right?
Is
But
that
in
insurance insuring you as a teacher? Is that what that's about?
Oh, it's health insurance. I'm sorry. I needed
okay.
to make that clear. Health insurance for teachers and their families.
Okay.
So, and we all know that health insurance costs have skyrocketed, right? And for educators, it's the same, but what's happening in some of, our smaller and rural school districts is that, any raises that you get are eaten up by health insurance costs. So, that we need to fix that. So I'm really excited about that legislation coming up. There's lots of crime legislation to address increasing crime in all over the state. I'm looking at that pretty carefully. Some I agree with, and some I think I have a lot of questions on. So looking at that, I'm working with the amazing reps, Angelica Rubio and Andrea Romero, on bringing back that housing legislation, tenants' rights legislation that would, ensure that tenants are really, are taken care of. And I've signed on to that, and I'll be working really closely with them on that legislation as well.
That's one of our bills. Yes. All right. So
Awesome.
We're almost out of time. And so I want to offer you an opportunity to tell people how they can get in touch with you. And then we'll come back and ask some more questions about hydrogen and some other bills for the podcast.
Great. You can reach me at my on my cell. It's probably the best way. Texting, I text like a fiend. 575-770-7792. That's my cell. You can really always, I'm not always going to answer, but as soon as I can, I will. You can also reach me in two ways via email. Kristina with a K .ortez, Kristina.Ortez at nmlegis.gov, or Kristina.Ortez@gmail.com. And that's Kristina with a K, Ortez with an E.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it. We're completely out of time. So next week, we're going to have Abbas Akil, a former representative, on the show. And we're going to be talking about hydrogen and all of the governor's climate bills. So get back with us next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and above all, stay active. It's the only way we fix this mess. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Check the rest of the show on retakeourdemocracy.org. And by the miracle of podcast, we're back.
Hi.
With Representative KristinaOrtez with an E and a K.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you about HB 36. It's the Natural Heritage Conservation Act amendments. I see that Representative McQueen is also sponsoring the bill. And I had breakfast with him last week, and he mentioned this bill as a priority for him. And he said that while the amendments are minor, they're very important. Can you tell us the purpose of the original legislation, why the amendments are needed, and what the amendments would do? I recall it might have had something to do with the ability to purchase land, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. It is. It's the ability to purchase land, make an acquisition as a state or as the state entity or as a political subdivision. That's not something that we can do right now very easily. And he's right. It's a minor change, and we worked really hard with the agency to make sure that it made sense and that we could do it now. Last year's NHCA amendment had other changes. We really want to modernize that and make the committee that hears projects more diverse and more reflective of the community of the entire state. And I think that's something that we got a lot of support from various groups for that. It didn't seem like it was possible to do that now, and the agency is able to do some of that work to modernize and expand the committee via its rulemaking process. So we felt good that this was one thing that we could do right now to enable the state to meet those 30 by 30 goals. Our governor is really supportive of that, and this was the way to do it. So I think it's important to think about how rural communities don't have access to local funding to purchase land for a park, or in the case of Taos, an acequia that has fallow land, that's part of, that gets water from a ditch, right? And this change allows that acequia or Taos Pueblo or Picuris Pueblo or, any Pueblo or tribal nation to tap into state funding to do that, to acquire land for traditional purposes, for agriculture. So that's I think that's really important. Land grants as well will be able to tap into that state funding mechanism if we can make this change. So there are a couple of things. It's about leveraging federal resources as well.
What's the opposition to this? It sounds like a no-brainer.
I think that some folks are concerned that the state government will just take over private lands. I think it's really important that this is not about that. This is about political subdivisions and counties and cities being able to tap into the state funding to acquire. There's an acequia up in Taos that would love to acquire a 5-acre parcel of land that's adjacent to the Carson National Forest. It's where the main headgate is for the Rio Fernando. And we've had lots of conversations about buying this little tiny triangle. It's 5 acres, right? And the acequia doesn't have the money to purchase that land from that private landowner who wants to sell it, right? And the process for the federal government sort of adding it to the Carson National Forest, that's nearly impossible. It's not big enough, right? We don't,
Right.
We can't tap into forest legacy funds or various other Forest Service funding mechanisms to do that. So it's just sitting there, and it could be purchased by a private landowner, but there's an acequia, a headgate on it. It needs to be maintained. It's the most important headgate coming from the Rio Fernando, from the headwaters into the town of Taos and the rest of the county. So that's an example of how, if we made this change, the acequia association, which is a political subdivision that maintains that headgate, could purchase that land using some state funds, leveraging other federal funds. So that's an example, or a watershed association, in down south, that may have some access issues, could also tap into this fund to purchase a right of way or land to be able to access their watershed. That's what this is about.
Okay, and it seems like a good bill.
Yeah.
So there's been quite a bit of banter about the governor's hydrogen hub initiative. How do you feel about the bill?
I think it's really, really complicated. I read something recently that one of the advocates said that it's a narrow a narrow pathway with steep precipices on either side. And I think that's right. I think that, I don't know enough about hydrogen to make an informed choice. I'm learning so much. Thanks, Retake Our Democracy, for and Jay Levine, who may be listening, who was on your show last week. I've learned a lot very, very recently, too quickly, about hydrogen. And the questions I have is, what I'm hearing is, that green hydrogen is the way to go. Green hydrogen requires water, which we don't have a lot of. So, I'm concerned about using fossil fuels to, drive a renewable resource. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. And I want to make sure that impacted communities have been a part of the process. And I think that there's some effort to engage impacted communities, really a really strong effort. But I feel like I have a lot of questions and I have a lot of concerns, and I'm learning more about it very, very quickly. But I think that we need a little bit more time.
Yeah, well, maybe the Senator Stefanik's memorial on this is a better path, so they can study it for a while. As I'm sure you have heard, the governor has announced an agreement with New Mexico's 2 national laboratories to build a hydrogen economy. 3 state agencies would tap technologies and expertise of Los Alamos and Sandia National Laboratories for the endeavor. As Governor Michelle Lohan Grisham pursues plans to make New Mexico a hydrogen hub. Given the legislature has not approved the hydrogen hub legislation, does it feel like the governor has jumped the gun here? And do you have any idea what happens to this agreement if her hydrogen hub legislation fails to pass?
Let me answer the second part first, which is that I really don't know what it looks like, in terms of if the legislature, says no to the bill. Does that mean that we can't go forward with research? I don't know, but I would say, I would find it unfortunate. I think we do need the research. I support science. I think we should do all the research we can on all the ways in which we can make our planet livable and sustainable. Right? I do support that. I like the idea of labs doing more of the energy research, and I think we should do that. I think it's the governor's job to be innovative and visionary. I don't know if this is the path I would go down. But I support her desire to find ways to get us out of this climate crisis. I just don't know if hydrogen is the right path, especially hydrogen as it exists right now. And the form that would potentially lead to more emissions. And I think we need to look at it a little bit more. It is her job. It is her job to be visionary, right? We want a leader who can think of new ways to get us out of crises. I just don't know if this is the right way.
I couldn't agree with you more on all points. I do think it's the governor's job to try and think about things like this and try and come up with different paths. And but I agree with you that I don't think this is the path we want to take. We'll see. That's going to be a real battle in the legislature, because there are a number of bills that incorporate some of the concepts of hydrogen that are going to be coming forward. And so that's going to be discussion that's going to be almost nonstop in the session. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners as we close the podcast?
I just want to tell you all how grateful I am for your participation. It is because of you, Paul, and all the listeners that that we are learning about issues. It's really important from my perspective as a legislature to hear the voice of the people, and you're really good at it, and keep it coming. Thank you for your activism. I think that's the most important thing that we have in our democracy, is people who are able to speak up and have the mechanisms and pathways to do that. And I will always support that. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Representative. It's been delightful chatting, and
thanks.
Good luck with the session and with the Natural Heritage Conservation Act. We'll be tracking that closely.
Thank you. And SEED.
And SEED.
Energy efficiency for all.
Okay.
Lower utility bills for all. Thank you.
All right. We'll be back next week and we'll be speaking with Abbas Akil, the former House rep and energy scientist. We'll be speaking about the Hydrogen Hub Initiative and a couple of bills he's interested in that are possibly flying under your radar, but they're certainly not under his. He's all over it. He's a delightful man and so well informed. So tune in next week at 8:30. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay active. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.